Hi, Toma. Welcome to GTM Expertise. Thanks for taking your time.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
No problem at all. Maybe we just start with your current role, where you are, and maybe a little bit about your career so far.
Sure. So I'm currently CEO of V24. I've been in the role for nearly 2 years. V24 is, I always think, should I say startup or not? Because we look like a startup, but we've been around for many years. So the company was originally founded in its most original form back in 2005. It's gone through lots of evolution and pivoting since then. But we look like a startup because we're about 20 people doing just under $2 million in annual recurring revenue. And I believe we're innovative. We're coming up with new features and product constantly. And I think in a very exciting space that is quickly evolving and constantly on people's minds.
Awesome. That sounds very varied. And what brought you to V24? Can you paint a little picture about where you started your career and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So very start of my career nearly 20 years ago, started in more technical roles. My first role was a customer-facing on-site customer support role that involved coding as well. A big thing for me in that role was that I traveled around the world. So I was constantly on customer sites. I'd go on 2, 3, 4 week trips that covered multiple countries and different continents. So I learned a lot while being in front of customers, trying to help them solve problems on site. From there, it evolved into doing some pre-sales or sales engineering work. I had a big opportunity to relocate to Singapore to lead a team of pre-sales engineers as part of working for a French company back then. And then I had a big advancement in my career when going from leading a team of a handful of pre-sales engineers to leading the region for the company. So that involved leadership of the sales team, customer support, success, as well as the sales engineering. So that was the start of my sales career, I would say, about 12, 13 years ago. Did that for a couple of companies, including where Ben, you and I worked together at Brightcove, where we joined a company that was well established, but in a region that wasn't as much, and grew at an incredible rate, where we went from 5 people doing about $1 million a year to 25 or so doing about 20 in just a few years. And then kind of climbed the ranks, managed larger sales teams, moved back to the US, and most recently made the jump from being a chief revenue officer at another startup to being the CEO at V24.
Awesome. That's a great background. Thanks, Toma. The variety, not only in terms of company and company size, but also geography, probably helped frame what you're doing today in the CEO role. So I'd like to dig into that a bit if I can. So, the topic of this session with GTM Expertise is around building a successful sales team. And obviously there are a lot of things we can dig into, but maybe to start with, you've gone from areas where you built a few people to managing quite a number of people. What do you look for when you start to build a sales team? Who are you looking for, and what are those people? What are the characteristics those people have?
So I think the people is the most important aspect of having a successful team, especially in my experience, having a few really strong contributors that make the difference. In the end, sales is kind of binary, right? You either win the deal or you lose it. So the difference between having someone who's pretty good and someone who's not so good is typically, a win versus a lose. So finding really good people that have a strong understanding of the domain. People, in my experience, the best salespeople are those that want to dig deeper and really understand the problem that the product is solving, or the industry to a deeper level. In many cases, just like I was, and just like you've been, having an experience coming from a technical background, which enables them to have deeper conversations with the buyers and really dig into understanding what it is that they're trying to solve. So having a few key people on the team, at the very minimum, a few key people that can really dig deep and really understand the customer's problems, and that being always a focus of what it is you're trying to do. Try to help the customer solve a particular problem. So I think finding the right people and then keeping them happy and motivated and on board, very difficult to do, especially with, in my experience, the big tech companies heavily recruiting out of companies I've worked for. So making sure that you're building a team that have fun working together and want to stay there and want to grow something. It's always easier when you have success. Being on a team that grows is fun and people stick around. When things are a little bit stagnant or shrinking, it's always more difficult. So you always have to have your finger on the pulse and making sure that you understand, as a leader, you understand what motivates the people and what would keep them there. Because in the end of the day, all it is the team. If you don't have the team in place, then you have nothing.
Super interesting. There's a lot there that I think you can unpick. The concept of having a culture and a motivation beyond the finances, if you like, of a sales operation. As a salesperson, a lot of the compensation, if you like, and often a lot of the drive, not always, but a lot of the drive is around, what can I make and how successful I am is based on how much I sell. But when you go beyond that and look at a larger team and how they interact, you've been in situations where you've had multiple cultures, I guess, coming together. Everyone's at different stages in their lives in terms of what they want to do. Some are a lot more risk averse. Some they're happy to put everything on the line to be successful, and kind of keeping them in that company. What are the sort of things people look for outside of compensation, if you like, in sales terms? If you're looking to build a team and keep that team together and keep them driving towards hopefully a multi-year goal, what are the things you would do as a leader that would help bring them together and keep them motivated?
So I think there's the obvious kind of HR related stuff, having a nice environment to work in and going out for drinks or some kind of team building activities often. I think that's the obvious. Winning, feeling like you're on a part of a winning team, I think is critical. And a lot of that has to do with how things are framed rather than actual success metrics. If you're at a company that sets very hard to reach goals, so if, the goal is to grow 5x, but you only grow 3x, you may have people feeling like they're not doing a great job, they're not part of a winning team, and that can demotivate people. So as a leader, your responsibility is to set goals that are achievable and set them also in such a way in which you can constantly show that you're achieving milestones and making progress. And like you said, there needs to be a longer term goal in mind, and you always have to be constantly hacking at it and trying to show that you're reaching shorter milestones as part of a long-term process of reaching something that's very, very far away. And if you're not closing deals, then you have to find other indicators that can help show that progress. And it's your responsibility, obviously, as a leader, to also set those milestones, set those targets that are not only the hard numbers, the finances, but also softer targets that you can lean on when you don't have actual sales results. So that's a key thing. When you have I think a diverse team, and you can measure diversity in many different ways, but having people come with different opinions and different views is very helpful. We were fortunate to be on a team that I think 20 people had probably 15 or so different passports, which was a lot of fun and brought a lot of different perspectives. So that, in my experience, that's incredibly good. Often I think, maybe I'll touch on something you didn't ask, but I think is related. Many people try to hire salespeople that are from the industry or have a book of contacts that they will call on. And in my experience, that never works out as you would have hoped it would. The person who promises that they're going to reach out to all these people that they already know on day one, I think it's a tough thing to do, and I've never seen, and I've tried many times, I've never seen anyone that really delivers on that. Rather, the people who do have success are the ones that are thoughtful and start building those new relationships, and as I said before, really dive into what is the problem that the customer is trying to solve. And it may take some time, but they're planting seeds, and eventually those seeds turn into opportunities, and you see a hockey stick type of effect where you're having a lot of conversations, and then maybe in the second year some of those conversations come to fruition, and then in the third year all of a sudden you have a really good mature pipeline and a very high closing rate, as opposed to someone who says, I know all these people and they're going to buy from me because they trust me. In the end of the day, people want to be successful. They don't want to buy from someone that says that they've had a relationship with for 20 years. So one of the mistakes that I've made, one of the many, is hiring people who promise that on day one they're going to deliver all these existing contacts. In reality, it's never worked out.
That's really great. I think that resonates with me. I've seen that in a bunch of industries, but I guess what you find is that those who know everyone don't necessarily know how to sell to those people. They might know them socially. They might know them from just being around in that industry for some time. They may have moved on many companies. I guess you have to question why that is, right? And how successful they have been. And I think to your point around that domain experience, I think in some very technical B2B SaaS platforms in particular, where they're selling into a specific vertical, I think having the experience at least that you've been in that industry is very valuable. But being able to generate a fresh relationship with someone is really key. And I think just one point you put in the last bit was around patience. You mentioned that first year you're going out there, you're spreading the word, you're getting your brand out there. If it's a new brand, you're understanding who's in the landscape, you go into events, you're doing a lot of things, but not necessarily things that in the early few months or an investor might be looking at revenue, for example. Those might not be the goals, and you really have to have the patience to get to the second or even third year before things start to motivate. How do you deal with that in a sales context? You've obviously got a team to manage, and they're hungry to get runs on the board. You mentioned some of those soft targets, but in terms of just keeping that patience going and making sure people are doing the right things, what are those right things that you would advise someone to do in that kind of first year as you're getting going, a new region or a new startup?
Yeah, I think I'll answer your question, but first, like as background, I think oftentimes, whether it be people who are maybe less experienced in sales, or maybe if it's a board of directors, investors, people tend to oversimplify what the sales process is like. For example, I get asked this all the time by our investors. What's the sales cycle? And the expectation is an answer like it's 4 months long on average. Okay, well, if you're having a conversation, why isn't the deal closing 4 months later? When I think the reality is that, well, it depends what the source is. If I'm having a first conversation with someone who currently, that person may be the buyer, but currently they don't have a budget, or they don't have, maybe they're in a 3-year contract with a vendor that fills the same challenge for them. That sales cycle may be 3 years, and that's okay. So rather than looking strictly at the sales cycle, to your question, you need to be measuring other things, other leading indicators. The one that I really like is having meaningful conversations. I think some of the CRM companies are starting to, or have started to, implement that as one of the metrics that is being measured. But what the best, and you and I have both seen this, the best way to measure a new salesperson or a new effort, in a new sales effort, is how many conversations and meaningful conversations is that person having. You want someone who is filling their calendar with meetings with the right people. They may not lead to deals this quarter, this year. But having those conversations, eventually that customer is also in a cycle. So eventually the end of the cycle comes, and then all of a sudden they're in market, and then they come back to you with the need. So there's actually another skill there, which is a very important one, I think, in life in general, but also in sales, which is maintaining relationships. It's so difficult to do, whether it be your personal relationship with friends, especially when we live in different parts of the world, or maintaining relationships with people who may buy from you at some point. But checking in once in a while, or having a fixed calendar invite. Maybe you meet with someone once a quarter just to see how things are going. But maintaining that, and as a result, not only contacting them when you need something or when you want something from them. So that's incredibly important. And I think part of the art of sales has been lost, where people used to come into the office for a coffee, especially with a remote working, and visiting. When you and I worked together, we did a ton of this in Singapore. We would just go to meet and have a coffee, give some updates, what are the latest features in the product, show off some recent new customers and their use cases, and do that even when there isn't an immediate sales opportunity, so that when there will be one, all of a sudden you get an inbound opportunity, because that person thinks of you when they have a need. So back to the sales cycle, you see, maybe in the CRM, you see an inbound opportunity that closed within 2 months. But the reality is that you need a really good salesperson to maintain that relationship, maybe for 3 years. And then once the need comes up on the customer side, they come to you and they buy quickly.
That's great. I can relate to that. I think I remember thinking about the fact that you can also learn from those conversations, right? As a salesperson, we can often think about it being a one-way kind of, like you say, that investors look at it this way too. It's like a funnel, and it goes from top to bottom, and it's like a linear relationship, and you're trying to get that as short as possible, of course, but it's kind of a one-way sale. Even those conversations, like you mentioned, when you're talking to someone when they're not buying, and actually you're not really selling, or selling to an opportunity, you're selling the concept of a solution, potentially, nothing specific. You can learn back from them, especially if you're in a startup. The fastest way you can learn from those conversations, the better, right? If you think that your ideal customer profile is in finance, and you're going to have 3 or 4 conversations with finance people, you might very quickly realize it isn't in finance, and that could save you a lot of time. So I think it's really important to learn from those conversations and to get out there. And especially for startups who are looking at their next kind of 6 to 12 months, meaningful conversations makes a lot of sense, for many reasons. Not only it can take a long time to get a sale done, but also that kind of bidirectional learning, I think, is really, really cool and really important. So
yeah, totally
that's
agree.
great.
Yeah, you're especially as a earlier stage company, you're constantly refining your ICP and your product as well, right? The feedback loop from the so-called sales meeting to the product and engineering team is critical. And again, a good salesperson versus a not so great salesperson is one that would take that feedback, understand it, be able to tie it to what the company is currently working on, and give that as very prescriptive feedback to the product team. So I think, back to your earlier question, who is it that you want on your team? You want someone that can do that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's someone that's very senior, or someone that has a lot of experience or domain expertise. It's more about the attitude and the way someone thinks about the job. And the good salespeople are people who would make good project managers and make good general managers, and they think beyond, like, the deal that I need to close this quarter in order to hit my target.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I think in that early stage as well, you talk about bringing back features for the product team, things like that. In an early startup, that can often be all rolled into one role, right? When you're in a corporate, you might turn up to a meeting, there can be 4 or 5 people with you. You've got product specialists, solutions engineers, you've got support people, account managers, et cetera, et cetera. But in a startup, it might just be you, and you've got to play the salesperson, but you've also got to play kind of the architect as well as product manager, if you like, to bring back those features. In an early stage, that salesperson role isn't purely sales, is it? It's very much an information gathering exercise as much as anything, and be able to very quickly on the hop and on the spot kind of turn a conversation into something that could go down 5, 6, 7 avenues, right? Whether it's actually there is an immediate opportunity, and I can see in my head we don't really want to sell them the full solution yet because we haven't got the solution yet. They're probably not ready to get involved with an early stage startup, but maybe there's a pilot we could offer them, or maybe, and so that kind of reactivity on the spot is a big skill, I think, for a successful salesperson to be able to do in that early stage. So yeah.
You remind me, in my last company, we implemented Gong, the call recording and analysis product, and I wasn't too excited about it. I thought, okay, it'd be nice to have all the calls recorded, but there were two really interesting value adds. One, it was incredible for the product team to go and have this indexed database of all the calls from prospects. It was actually much more valuable for the product team than it was for the sales team, even though it was like a sales tool. And then secondly, I don't know, maybe now it's better than it was, but it was okay a couple of years ago when I used it. The Gong is able to show you data on the calls. For example, it can show how long the salesperson's talking versus the customer is talking, and it shows how long you pause when a question is asked before you answer it. All kinds of interesting data on the conversation, and they have some best practices. For example, they say you should pause. I don't remember the number, but you shouldn't answer right away. You should think about it a little bit, and it's a better conversation when you don't almost interrupt people. But I could see I had a team of about a dozen people at the time, and I could see that the people who were really good talked much less in conversations. They let the customers talk, and I could work out from that they're digging into the customer's problems and letting the customer explain their problems, and rather than just selling. And there was this clear delineation between the good people talking less, the not so great people talking a lot more, not having as many back and forths, so less of a conversation, more like a presentation, which is very interesting. So that's another part of it, I think. Part of that the prototype of who's the typical salesperson you want to hire.
That's really great to hear as well, because you hear about successful salespeople and sales techniques and the kind of textbook, if you like, way of doing things, and certainly talking less and listening more, and active listening is kind of spouted a lot and something. But it's great to hear that you actually see that in real life as well, and it's not just you telling your salespeople to do so. And often, as a sales manager or leader, if you're the CEO or you're a sales manager or CRO, you're not often able to go and be on every call, right? And so whilst what you say in the Monday morning sales meeting might be your coaching, what happens in reality might be quite different. It's great to hear that you can get that feedback and even see a correlation there between potential success and failure, if you like, based on folks. I wanted to touch on that one because I think that leads nicely into like how you build a makeup of a sales team. And for an unlimited budget, obviously that's a different question. I don't think anyone has an unlimited budget these days. So what's realistic? If I'm a founder, a startup founder, or I'm building my go-to-market team and I need a few players in there, there are let's be realistic. There are a lot of there are some A players, and then there are B's, C's, D's, and there's a whole mix there. A players, and I would describe an A player as someone who is highly switched on, intellectual, understands, has emotional intelligence when they're selling, but also very competitive usually as well, almost like an A type, if you like, on that spectrum. And so, how do you mix all that together, and can you feasibly have a team of all A players if you're lucky? And maybe that's not budget dependent; it's just the type of person you want. But how do you mix all that together and manage that and understand that, in your team you're going to have people who are very successful, and the others might view that as negative if they're always getting the praise. But yeah, can you share something about that and how that's gone for you in the past?
I think in the early stages or in the smaller teams, you have to be aiming to have only A players. And you obviously will have some B, C, however you want to categorize them. You'll have some people who are less successful, but that's kind of like a rotation as you're trying to find the really good players. And the interviewing is incredibly difficult, and it's difficult to be right, but you have to restart and hire again when the person's below average, especially. But even average is probably not good enough. When you have a team of 30 reps, it's a different ballgame. But when you have a handful or less, I think you probably want to have only A players, and that may mean that you have one or two people that are really good, and then three or four people that probably don't last too long, and there's this rotation until you hit it. And once you hit it, and you have someone who's really good and really promising, you do everything that you can to keep that person. You can't afford having people who are not great at that stage. So that would be my recommendation. As the sales leader, or as the CEO at those stages of the company, you have to be really involved. And I advised a couple of companies that were at the very early stages where they were considering hiring their first salesperson. And my advice was push that out as far as possible. Like, as the CEO or as one of the co-founders that is doing the selling, you should try to stretch that out as much as you can, because that initial scaling is really difficult, and the drop off from founder-led sales motion to a newly hired sales rep, and at that point you probably don't have budget to hire someone who is really good. It's a big drop off, and you're going to end up being unhappy more likely than not. The other, just going back a couple of topics, hiring salespeople is difficult. And what I look for one of the things I look for now that I didn't look for in the past is someone that has had promotions in their history. So obviously you don't want someone who's constantly hopping from one company to another. But I think also you do want to look for someone who's been promoted. I think that when you see someone, they may have been 2 or 3 years at every stop in their career, but you don't see any promotions in their record, I think that's a red flag. The other thing that makes hiring salespeople very difficult is that when someone is selling and they're doing well, they're earning a lot of commission, and then they're very unlikely to leave their current situation unless something unusual happens. If they're doing well, they're closing a lot, they're getting a lot of commission, the company is likely going to be doing well. So it's very difficult at the early stage, when your means are relatively limited, to find someone who's available, has a good track record, and you can really trust them. So once you do find one, you really want to hold on to them. And when you see someone that's not working out, you probably want to reset and try again. Thinking back about the 3 or 4 last teams that I've led, there were kind of the cornerstones that were delivering, and then the others, it was kind of a rotation, trying to find that next person that I can put into that bucket of the people who are really good and getting really good results. And again, the way to measure that is the meaningful conversations, and someone who's really filling their calendar up with meetings with the right people and maintaining those relationships. And then they're meeting them again, even if there's no deal to be made. that's what you want, and that's what will eventually, it may be 6 months, it may be 24 months down the road, but eventually it will lead to getting business closed.
I think that's a good point to end on. I reckon we could talk for another 4 hours on hiring and hiring salespeople and the war stories there. I know it's a topic that we may well have you talk on again, Toma, because I think as a founder, especially those early hires, they make or break, and that kind of step down from founder-led sales that you mentioned there is really, really key and something people should be aware of, and kind of holding out as long as you can before you do that is really good advice. But I really like the idea of promotions. I think that's a great leading indicator for folks to look at. So I want to say a huge thank you, Toma, for talking with us here at GTM Expertise. I really appreciate your time and all your thoughts and your advice. And hopefully we'll have you on here again. We'll have another chat about another topic. So thanks again, Toma. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks, Ben.